Hello everyone, B.O.R.G Dexter here, and in this video I have the delight to review an amazing Resident Evil inspired indie game called Conscript, which takes place during World War I. Just to be clear from the start, when I say Resident Evil inspired, there are no zombies here or any supernatural forces. Everything is realistic, and the horrors of war, so well depicted here, are more than enough to provide a frightening horror experience. This game was published by Team 17 and made by Catchweight Studios, which comprises of a solo developer named Jordan Mochi, I hope I got that right, from Australia I believe, available for all platforms. This is, by the way, his first ever game, which is very impressive, especially considering that the dev had no prior experience in making games. You take the role of André, a young French lad that is, along with his brother Pierre, torn away from their picturesque life in rural France to be taken to war against the Germans, with the occasional look back on the past of our main character and his brother, leading up to the war, giving us opportunity to get to know them more. What follows is a story that explores themes like PTSD, refusal to fight or even go to war, the futility of war and its cost and impact on the people that are swept up in its horrible torrent. So, while the story itself is not too original and has been explored before many times in video games as well as other media like movies, the way the story is told is engrossing. I must say that there are many things that contribute to the game's story being interesting, one of them being the absolutely amazing environmental storytelling. The destroyed towns and villages, the muddy and decrepit trenches, the horse and soldier corpses strewn about, and the enemies you wound screaming, in German by the way, which contributes further to the atmosphere. Things like, "I can't feel my legs," or screaming for a medic. I think I even heard a few of them scream for their mother.
Ich kann meine Beine nicht spüren.
Another great feature of the game is that sometimes when you kill a German, you will find a picture that he was holding. These can be pictures of hometowns, girlfriends or wives, children, or even pets. This genuinely made me feel a bit sad when I saw these pictures, a great idea by the dev. The various notes that you can find along the way also provide a perspective of various people on both sides, civilians and soldiers alike, of the war, and the way it affects them and the people around them, as well as oftentimes containing hints for puzzles in the game. As far as the graphics go, the game has low-res pixelated graphics, which is fine by me. Considering this is an indie dev which made his first game and had absolutely no prior experience in making video games, it is no wonder the game looks like it does. Despite such graphics, the game does really well in conveying the doom and gloom of the World War I trenches, ruined towns, underground spaces like cellars, mines or caves, and even a few forts. In fact, I would argue that with graphics like these, you have to use your imagination a bit, unlike games that have amazing, very detailed graphics, which contributes to the great atmosphere of the game, in my opinion. The only complaint I have in terms of the game appearance is that the game can be too dark to see anything when HDR is on. I don't know if this is a problem with my TV or my setup or something, but when HDR is on, it is almost too dark to see anything. This is especially troublesome in underground spaces, which even when I carry a torch and turn it on, it is sometimes difficult to see much. I would now like to dedicate some time to speak of the sounds and music of the game. The dev must be commended for the sound too. Whether you are walking on wooden planks, artillery shell casings, or muddy areas that sometimes have the effect of slowing you down as well as preventing you from dodge rolling, all have distinct sounds. The same is true for weapons in the game, and while the quality of the sound of the weapons is nothing like on the level of games like Battlefield 1 or Battlefield 3 or 4, they do a decent enough job. The music I thought was almost non-existent and very subdued until I reached chapter 3, where I feel the music assumed a more prominent role, and at times I was expecting for demons from hell to spawn and charge at me or some otherworldly presence. The music was so horror-like, especially at the end. The music can also be more subdued and nuanced in more somber moments, with some interludes of music in important or intense moments. Overall, very good. Okay, onto the gameplay itself now. Before you start the game, you will be given the option to turn on checkpoints and have unlimited saves. Turning on checkpoints means that the game will save your progress automatically at certain times, which can save you a lot of frustration, and unlimited saves mean that you do not need to use ink pellets to save the game. Turning any of these options on will prevent you from being able to get an S+ rank at the end. And I started the game with both options turned off, but quickly came to realize it was a mistake. So after being about an hour in, I started anew with the checkpoints turned on, which in my opinion is a good decision, especially for a first run. So I would advise you to do the same. Ink pellets are easy enough to get, so I kept the unlimited saves option turned off. Okay, on to the actual gameplay itself. When I said the game is inspired by games the likes of Resident Evil and Silent Hill, which even the dev said himself in one interview I read after completing the game, I meant it. There are many locked doors with various insignias on them. There is a merchant where you can buy various items and upgrade weapons, a storage box for items, combining gunpowder and chemical fluids to craft ammo, combining multiple health items to get a more potent health item, the way where keys are automatically discarded by the game as soon as they are unnecessary, which I first remember seeing in a Resident Evil game back in the day. However, all of this does not mean that the game is a cheap Resident Evil clone, quite the opposite. While the game is heavily inspired by these games, most prominently in the gameplay mechanics, it charts a course of its own, and the dev made an excellent game that will be liked by most fans of Resident Evil or Silent Hill games, while offering players something truly unique. So, the way I would describe the gameplay loop is this. You come to an area where most doors are locked or passages are blocked somehow. These locks can vary from simple locks that require a lockpick, for example, or a key. Some doors have symbols on them, such as a lion, a cross, or a diamond symbol, requiring you to find the key corresponding to the door symbol. Other passages require an item other than a key to progress, such as a fire extinguisher to put out fires barring your way. Now I must admit there is something so satisfying about reaching a new area and gradually uncovering the entire map, until the whole area is thoroughly explored. I also love the way the levels are designed, because you slowly work to create shortcuts and the level loops in onto itself. This also reduces the amount of backtracking you need to do. When I first arrive at a new location, I look at the map constantly, but by the time I unlock some doors and passages, I get familiar with the location, looking at the map less, which is satisfying on its own. However, there is one thing that I did not like when it comes to the level design. And that is that sometimes, in order to get from point A to point B in a given singular area of the map, you will need to weave around multiple laughable and insignificant obstacles, such as puddles or waist-high fences, maybe dead horses for example. I found it annoying that I had to circumvent these laughable obstacles instead of having a more direct route to the place I want to go. This is especially true for areas that you will need to come through often while backtracking. A good example of this is the ruined farm area in a forest near a fort. This, while being more of a nitpick, bothered me enough that I decided to mention it. As you are progressing through the game, you will come upon enemy soldiers. And like in Resident Evil games, you need to gauge whether or not you will kill these enemies. If you decide to kill them, you risk being hurt or killed, and you will spend resources trying to kill them. But enemies never respawn. Well, they do after certain scripted events, but that doesn't happen often. So, if you will be going through a certain area a lot, it could be worthy to dispatch those enemies. If you do decide to kill enemies, after a while another menace will spawn. Ankle biters, aka rats. These can be dangerous if they are numerous. If they bite you, they do not take a lot of health away, but when they are in numbers, the damage can quickly add up. The most dangerous consequence of their bite is the possibility of being poisoned. If that happens, your max health drastically reduces until you either use a disinfected bandage or a first aid kit to cure the poison. Once the rats are killed, they will eventually come back, unless you destroy a nearby rat hole using a grenade. So you will always have enemies in your way. I rarely destroyed rat holes and always found it easier to deal with rats rather than humans, even with the risk of being poisoned. Plus, killing enemy soldiers is much more resource demanding. The best way to deal with rats, the only way I would say, the only viable way, is to use melee weapons, since it is much harder to hit them with guns due to their size. A word of advice here: if you wound a soldier, leave him lying there, because wounded soldiers seemingly never die, and rats spawn only on corpses, not on wounded soldiers. Combat itself is a fairly simple affair. You have numerous types of weapons such as pistols, rifles, a machine gun, grenades, shotguns, even machine gun emplacements that have limited ammo. Each weapon type, such as shotguns for example, have multiple iterations with different pros and cons. So, do you take a shotgun with 7 bullets that is less powerful but you don't need to reload as often? Or do you take a double-barrel shotgun which is more powerful but needs to be reloaded every 2 shots? Do you take a revolver that has a slower rate of fire, or a semi-automatic pistol that enables more rapid firing? There are also melee weapons in the game, like I said, which vary only in their damage output and are useful for, alongside killing rats, smashing barrels that contain loot. After you decide on your weapon of carnage, you need to point it at an enemy and get the reticle to become as small as possible, which takes time of course, to ensure an accurate shot. You will need to dodge roll or run away from an enemy to create space and time to take aim and shoot, which requires you to manage your stamina bar, which can be permanently increased using stimulants that you can buy from the merchant or find in the world. If your stamina runs out, you will slow down dramatically and be unable to roll until your stamina is slowly restored. Certain surfaces like stairs or particularly muddy areas will slow you down or even prevent you from dodging altogether. Whenever you can, approach the enemy from behind and smack him with a melee weapon in the head, as this can result in their immediate death, especially with stronger weapons such as the axe, saving you ammo and the risk of getting wounded or killed. Don't worry about the noise of your footsteps. Enemies cannot detect you in that way, though they can hear their allies alerting them or gunshots. At certain points in the game you will engage in enemy attack waves, which can be annoying, at least it was for me in the beginning, most especially since the combat can be a bit clunky and sometimes unresponsive. But as I got farther into the game, I understood the combat better, got better and more upgraded weapons, and while I did not love these action-heavy sections, I certainly didn't hate them. Also, in some of these fights you can choose to not participate, which will affect the ending you get. Yes, there are multiple endings. While most of the time you will be alone, at certain points you will come upon other French soldiers. This happens when there is an attack upcoming and makes you feel that even though you contribute to the fight mostly on your own, sometimes other people are there beside you. You will quickly find out that your allies are not really helpful in gameplay terms, but are rather there as a storytelling device that makes the game more immersive. Still, the addition of allies at certain points of the game is appreciated even if it has no apparent gameplay value. Other times you will come upon lone allies, such as the medic, who will seek an item from you and will give you something in return. Enemies are done well too. They also vary in appearance as well as in their tactics. At the beginning you will be assaulted by Germans carrying spades that will charge you, but as the game progresses, new enemy types will be introduced. You have heavily armored soldiers wielding axes that will rush you, caped officers that wield swords, riflemen with bayonets that fire off a shot and then charge at you with their bayonet, or men wielding flamethrowers, which in my opinion are not that hard to deal with, but are cool to fight against nonetheless, and the state of their backpack tanks changes the more you damage them. Unfortunately, you will not be able to wield a flamethrower in the game yourself. I would also have liked to have seen enemy snipers or even to get a sniper rifle on my own, but these things are not present in the game. Admittedly though, towards the end of the game, there will be a sniper that will kill an ally and you will constantly view your character through the lens of enemy binoculars in that section, but I never did confront the sniper himself. I must say though, that the AI of the enemies can leave something to be desired sometimes. Namely, I sometimes just whizzed by enemies, even in very tight corridors, without them even reacting to me. While this affects the immersion adversely, it is also funny, so I guess it balances itself out in a way. This happened often enough where I feel like I had to mention it.
Hello there. Hello there.
There is also a good amount of side content, so it pays to be thorough while exploring. These can range from optional areas of the map, where you might find some supplies or even new weapons, to a kind of mini side quests. For example, bringing a lost photo of a loved one to a German prisoner of war in exchange for some cigarettes, which are the game's currency. Sometimes, while exploring, you can find high-value items that can be combined with other valuable items. For example, combining a gold necklace with an empty socket, with a precious stone to give you a very valuable item to be sold. Another influence of the Resident Evil series. When you are not exploring or fighting Germans, you will be resting in save rooms sprinkled throughout the game. In these oases of peace, you will manage your inventory with the help of the storage boxes. You will also be dealing with the merchant, from whom you can buy supplies like bandages, gunpowders of various types, bags that will increase your inventory size. These bags can be found in the world also, by the way. Buying melee weapons like shovels or axes and the like. He can also upgrade your weapons using gun parts you collect or buy from him. You can upgrade the firepower, ammo capacity, fire rate and reload speed of each gun. There is also an option to talk to the merchant, which often led me to ask myself, who is he? How did he get here? Or even if he's real. I mean, look at the guy's portrait. It would be remiss of me to not mention the intelligent map that is available in the game. It will note all locked doors that you try to open, remembering which symbol or type of lock is needed to open it. It will also jot down things like locked drawers, which are optional locks that will require a small key to open. Passages blocked by rubble or other things, location of artillery guns, which can be loaded with 75mm shells to destroy blockages that will open other areas or create shortcuts. It will display all stairs and ladders and indicate if they lead up or down. In another display of little details that depict great environmental storytelling is that maps can have marks on them like bloody handprints. Great details, love it. As far as puzzles go, they are not too demanding on the brain, but are a welcome addition nonetheless. These often include collecting multiple items, like slabs, and then exploring around to figure out in which order to put them in the appropriate door. Oftentimes, you will need to reference notes that will provide clues, which will be needed to figure out a password for a combination lock, for example. While these puzzles, like I said, they are more brain teasers rather than complex, demanding puzzles, their addition does serve well to break up the gameplay loop and provide some variety. Considering that there are more endings, multiple costumes can be unlocked, there is a ranking system at the end, there are multiple difficulties. I played on Soldier, which is the normal difficulty. Loading a completed run save file will carry over weapons and items and things like that. It is easy to surmise that the game has good replay value. I got the shell-shocked ending and a D rating. Ouch. Damn, that's embarrassing. I will not look up other endings on YouTube so that I can return to the game spoiler free, especially considering that this ending is not great, yeah, go figure, and I could have done much better. I clocked in just over 14 hours in the game. You can knock off an hour and a half off that, since I lost some time taking notes while playing, which is just the right amount of time for a game like this, I feel. And with each following run, you should shave off more time, since you're gonna know what to do and where to go immediately. It would now be time to summarize my thoughts on the game and give it a rating. First off, it must be remembered that the game was made by a solo dev, this being his first foray into the world of making an entire game, and that he had no prior experience in game development. The game boasts an amazing atmosphere, completely immersing you in the struggles and horrors of World War I in Verdun. The game has a light puzzle element. The enemies vary in appearance as well as their behavior and tactics. There are different weapons available, each with its own strengths and weaknesses that can be upgraded. And while the combat is simple and can sometimes feel clunky, it is more than enough. It also behooves you to explore as much as possible, as the game rewards it with resources, valuable items that can be sold, and new weapons. The sound design is also decent, particularly with the music that elevates certain moments and scenes, whether they be intense or more somber. While the story told is nothing we haven't seen before, it grips you from the start with the help of great environmental storytelling and the way it humanizes your enemies in the game, while also delving into some heavy subjects. The graphics are low-res and pixelated, enabling you to use some of your imagination to fill in some gaps that the more good-looking games do not utilize. That is not to say, however, that the graphics are bad or ugly, just that it is a certain style that lends itself well to harnessing your imagination, thereby only adding further to the strength of the game, in my opinion. The game is just the right length while having replay value, as you might want to embark on more playthroughs to unlock new costumes, get different endings or better ranks at the end. Like I said before, you can also carry over items and weapons if you load a completed run save file, though doing this will disable the S+ rank. One of the few nitpicks that I have is that the game can be too dark if HDR is turned down. The enemy AI can be comically oblivious to your presence at times. Also, the level design can be annoying in a sense that sometimes silly obstacles like waist-high fences or puddles will prohibit passage, forcing you to take the long way around, which can be irritating, especially in areas that you will visit often due to backtracking. And that is my last little gripe with the game: backtracking. While this can be somewhat mitigated by simply deciding not to explore additional content as much or at all, exploring is heavily encouraged, I would say. And this can lead to some annoyance due to backtracking being required. Not so bad though. So, after I completed the game, I did a bit of research on the dev and found an interesting interview online in which he said, among many other interesting things, that if the game is successful enough, he would like to make another game, which could be taking place during World War II. I must admit, I would love to see that. One last thing to consider before I rate the game is this: I do not know in what state the game was at release and whether the game had major updates or not. I can only offer an opinion from the current time perspective, and I give Conscript a 9 out of 10, a great game, and I highly recommend it to anyone with even the remotest of interest in games like Resident Evil or Silent Hill or horror games in general. And even to anyone that may not be typically interested in that genre or these titles, please give this game some love and be open to giving this game a chance. This is a true indie jewel, and I wish the dev all the best in his future endeavors, and I'm looking forward to his next project. Okay guys, that's gonna be it for this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, give it a thumbs down. If you're interested in what I do, please consider subscribing, and let me know down in the comments below, what did you think of this game? Did you play it? Or if you did you like it? If you didn't play it, would you consider buying it? Let me know your thoughts down below. Okay, until next time, see ya.